IEBC portal. Various questions were raised arising to the format, many arguing at exactly what point did the format convert to PDF from a JPEG. We had counsel led by Philip Murgor, actually put up a case in terms of how the technology was not up to par. But definitely, according to the 7-judge bench, this is what they mentioned. No credible evidence was given that someone penetrated the system, and during the ICT scrutiny, the original Form 34As that were allegedly intercepted were still the same as the original Form 34As physical that were hand-delivered to the National Tallying Center. Point 3, still under the issue about the system, the integrity of Form 34As was not compromised, and it consisted of KIEM's reporting from the transmission to the verification of results, equally adding that no evidence of a man-in-the-middle server configured to IEBC VPN network, and that no IEBC staff was part of the alleged process. That's all to do with whether there was interference with uploading and transmission of Form 34As from the polling station to the IEBC public portal. On to the next issue, whether there was difference between Form 34A uploaded on the IEBC portal and those received at the National Tallying Center and those issued to various agents representing the political parties. Interesting submissions by the 7-judge bench, but let's start from what the petitioner argued, that the Form 34As were different. IEBC counter-argued that they used original Form 34As to tally, verify, and announce the results. Equally, remember that a recount in 41 polling stations was ordered by the Supreme Court. We saw the tallying happen, and according to them, there was no significant difference between the Form 34As on the portal and the physical Form 34As that were delivered at the Bomas of Kenya. No evidence, equally, that the forms with agents were actually changed. Number 2, that the affidavits filed in court must only deal with facts. And this is where we saw sort of a warning shot fired towards some of the counsel, with the Chief Justice mentioning that some of the behavior by the counsel was unacceptable, that the swearing to falsehoods is a criminal offense under the penal code. And we actually saw a couple of sworn affidavits, sensationally the one by John Githongo, the man with 2 Christian names, as he was referred to by one of the lawyers representing the IEBC. They definitely mentioned that issue on hearsay when it comes to Jose Camargo, the Venezuelan who was sort of alleged to have interfered with the systems at IEBC. According to the 7-judge bench, that was hot air. Quite a sharp term to use to sort of throw away the sworn affidavits that were, laid bare at the floor of the Supreme Court. But that's the latest in terms of some of the issues that were set for determination at the Supreme Court, even as we await for the official statement, the official words by the President-elect William Ruto and the Deputy President-elect Rigathi Gachagua, who we understand are set to give their opening statement to the nation, if I can use that word, in just but a few. Our camera lenses are definitely trained at the official Deputy President's residence, which is at Karen. So, of course, even as we wait for that particular mention, remember, we're still noting various reactions across the country. A little bit earlier on, we showed you what residents of Nakuru were up to. Some, if not most, out in the streets of Nakuru town celebrating. We equally saw similar scenes in Eldoret town, what is referred to as the political bastion of President-elect William Ruto. Remember, he was voted initially as a member of parliament representing Eldoret North constituency, a man who has never lost an election in which he was on the ballot. bearing in mind he was able to defend his seat as Member of Parliament, rising through the ranks. And right now we're speaking about the Deputy President, who has actually turned to become the President-elect. Very few in Kenya's political history, very few vice presidents in the previous dispensation actually rose to the highest seat in the land. Just to mention the one and only, the late President Moi was actually one of the vice presidents who rose to the position of president. And right now we've seen, under the new promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, William Ruto definitely making history as the first deputy president to succeed his boss and get that highly coveted position of President of the Republic of Kenya. Remember, he's still President-elect. Well, as you can see, we're still waiting for the official statement by the president-elect, even as leaders continue converging at the official residence of the deputy president. That's at Karen. But before we cross over right there, in earnest, we definitely have to inform you about the latest developments, not just happening locally, but globally as well. Even though we were in an election process, remember, we were not the only country in an election process. Britain, taking you farther east, or farther north rather, we have the latest news. And as you can see on your screen, Liz Truss is the new UK Prime Minister after defeating Rishi Sunak in the Tory leadership contest. It was a closer result than many pundits expected, with Truss taking 57% of the valid votes cast. Speaking at a conference, she thanked Sunak for a hard-fought campaign and pledged to deliver a bold plan. But that's the latest in terms of the leadership battle in Britain, in the United Kingdom. Liz Truss is said to be the next United Kingdom Prime Minister. Of course, we'll have more information for you, even as she's set to become Prime Minister just tomorrow, following that closely fought race where Truss took 57% of the valid votes cast. But back to the country, this is what we're dealing with right now. Of course, as we await for President-elect William Ruto to make his way to the podium, a little bit earlier on, we saw the red carpet rolled out for the President-elect, even as the Deputy President-elect Rigathi Gachagua is equally expected to come out and give a word of assurance to the nation. Of course, agenda number one on their list will be bringing the country together. It was a hardly fought race between William Ruto and the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential candidate Raila Odinga. But at the end of the day, Kenyans had their way and their say. And according to Article 40 of the Constitution, the election is definitely quite an important process, and their say was upheld by the Supreme Court. Of course, various leaders, including legal counsel that was representing the ninth respondent, William Ruto, in the Supreme Court case, the presidential petition, and one of the legal counsel who's right there on your screen, apart from the Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, that one gentleman was actually put to task to explain by Judge Smokin Wanjala, because he had used a biblical analogy Back then, in the Solomonic days, where a baby was presented before King Solomon, one of the claimants, saying that she was the mother, wanted to cut the baby in half, while the other was willing to give up the baby. So the council was definitely put to task to explain whether, he would actually go to his boss, whoever he was representing, William Ruto, and ask him whether he would be in a position, to let the baby go for the sake of the country. And of course, it was met on a light note, of course, at the Supreme Court. And Judge Smokin Wanjala definitely rested his case right after posing that particular question. But that marks the end of the Supreme Court process, those 14 days set aside by the Constitution in terms of perusing the petitioner's case, finding out whether the petitioner has a watertight case, whether they have proved beyond reasonable doubt that the election was not free, fair, and credible. But this time round, the respondents are actually victorious. And one man who has been, at the forefront of receiving criticism, especially from the Azimio la Umoja coalition allied leaders, was the IEBC chairperson, Wafula Chebukati, who in one way or the other has been vindicated by that particular judgment at the Supreme Court, because he was definitely a man on the radar. And we had some of the submissions by the legal counsel representing the petitioner, Raila Odinga. They mentioned that perhaps the chairperson, Wafula Chebukati, acted as a veto power, delegated domestic chores to the other IBC commissioners, as he gave, important roles to the CEO and himself. But of course, we had from the Supreme Court bench, the 7 judges, in a unanimous decision, actually laid down what the Constitution says in terms of the roles of the National Returning Officer. They equally borrowed from their 2017 judgment in terms of the Raila petition challenging the election of Uhuru Kenyatta in 2017 as a president. And we definitely saw some of the issues they broke down, because earlier on, the legal counsel were definitely comparing Article 138(3)(c) and Article 138(10) of the Constitution, where Article 138(3)(c), sort of breaks down the IEBC's duty to tally, verify results from all polling stations. And when you cross over to Article 138(10), it mentions that the chairperson will then announce the results. So the argument was whether Chebukati overstepped in his role as a chairperson and the National Returning Officer in announcing the results, even though there was disquiet or opaqueness amongst the commissioners. But that's definitely water under the bridge, even as we wait for the full judgment from the 7-judge bench, which should be available in 21 days' time. But as you can see, a red carpet has been rolled out. Various seats placed at the podium, and one would only anticipate that it belongs to the president-elect and the spouse as well. Equally, the deputy president-elect and the spouse right there at the podium, even as they're joined by various leaders allied to Kenya Kwanza. So in just but a few, we should be listening in to the words of affirmation to the country that should be coming from the president-elect of the Republic of Kenya, the incoming 5th president, William Samoei Ruto, who has had an astronomical rise in terms of his political career, which has been mentioned time and time again, starting back then with the founding party KANU being part of the YK92, equally later on representing the constituents of Eldoret North as their member of parliament. In 2002, supporting the candidature of Uhuru Kenyatta, who is vying on a KANU party ticket for the presidency. Of course, we well know that the late Mwai Kibaki emerged victorious in 2002. And we saw those pictures in terms of Uhuru Kenyatta conceding defeat in 2002, while William Ruto was right by his side. And of course, fast forward, William Ruto was able to, assume various ministerial positions. Just to mention one of them, the Ministry of Agriculture. Later on, he had to step down due to a couple of issues that were highlighted in the coalition government. He had to step down from that ministerial position, but later on, in 2012, we saw the formation or the coming together of his party and President Uhuru Kenyatta's TNA party to take a stab at the presidency. In 2013, remember, the narrative back then was centered mostly, if not partially, on the cases at the International Criminal Court, where, of course, the president-elect William Ruto, the outgoing president Uhuru Kenyatta, were adversely mentioned. And we saw the ICC cases kick off in earnest. A little bit later on, they were shot down due to lack of evidence or interference, according to the lead prosecutor at the ICC. But of course, he was deputy president then. The fallout post-2017 between William Ruto and outgoing president Uhuru Kenyatta definitely led to the formation of the UDA party. And that's when we saw sort of the disintegration of the former ruling party, Jubilee Party. And if we can borrow from how the parties fared on in the 2022 general election, of course, we have been breaking down the numbers for you. The UDA party definitely getting a substantial number of representation in the National Assembly, followed by the ODM party. But in extension, the Kenya Kwanza coalition definitely welcoming in various parties. And as you can see, one of the party leaders right there seated. Okay, the camera has moved. It's right now focused on the Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru, who was able to successfully defend her seat in the 2022 general election, beating her close competitor Ngirishi in that gubernatorial race. Various leaders allied to Kenya Kwanza, Alfred Mutua Still, who sensationally jumped ship just recently before the election from the Azimio coalition, perhaps citing being overlooked as the Maendeleo Chapchap party. And they mentioned that they felt welcome at the Kenya Kwanza coalition. But remember, on paper, MCC is still allied to Azimio, according to the documents that were deposited at the Register of Political Parties. But we well know what the law has to say. I think it's a timeline of 3 months. Then they can exit whichever coalition and join whichever coalition they deem fit. But that's the latest in terms of live pictures from the Deputy President's residence at Karen. The former Speaker of the National Assembly, who's allied to Kenya Kwanza, Justin Muturi, we equally saw him on the campaign trail, campaigning in favor of William Ruto, not just in parts of central Kenya, but across the country. And right now, most of these leaders with smiles on their faces as they await the words from the mouth of the incoming 5th President of the Republic of Kenya, President-elect William Ruto, who will be joined in just but a few with the Deputy President-elect, the outgoing Madeira Member of Parliament, that is Rigathi Gachagua. The stage is set, the camera lenses are trained, and it's just a matter of when and not if. When the president-elect and the deputy president-elect will be able to speak to the nation and give them a status update, perhaps in terms of their reaction following the Supreme Court win by their team. And that's why, in earnest, we've seen some of the legal counsel that was representing the ninth respondent, William Ruto, right there. But equally, they will definitely give a status update on the task ahead, not just in uniting the country, but equally breaking down their agenda, their economic agenda for the country going forward. Various leaders right there. Richard Ngatia, who was allied to the Jubilee Party, seems to have jumped ship. We have the former Migori governor also seated right there, including other leaders who are awaiting the arrival of Deputy President-elect Rigathi Gachagua and President-elect William Ruto. The legal counsel right there, led by Senior Counsel Ngatia. Of course, a lawyer in his own rights, Kipchumba Murkomen, equally seated there. Veronica Maina, who ranks highly in the hierarchy of the UDA party, amongst other leaders just waiting for that all-important judgment. Of course, we'll keep you updated about the latest developments happening at the official residence of the Deputy President.